you got to know people around the nation are fired up. They're looking at what we're doing. I apologize for taking the call. It was Congressman Chaffetz. You know that he just got appointed the chairman of the Oversight Committee. Well, guess what the Oversight Committee gets to do, and guess what he's gearing up to do? Access, health, productivity on our lands is being diminished, restricted, destroyed with federal policies that are just simply inexplicable. And he's got Cynthia, he was just telling, he's got Cynthia Lummis, who is the congresswoman from Wyoming, very friendly on all these issues. She's going to be chairing the Interior Subcommittee of the Oversight Committee, so that we can start looking into and telling these stories of what's happening. The story I was just telling him was Benoit County, Idaho. Their whole economy is timber. That's their resource. It's been their resource forever. They know it's their resource. That's why they have a community. And they can't harvest any trees because we don't know why. Because we've got a federal forest policy that manages the forest for maximum combustion instead of for access, health, and productivity. And this commissioner was telling me, they said it's worse than it's ever been before, because not only is it bad that with the roadless rules and everything we may have a fire, now we have, with the roadless rules and the overgrowth of the timber, we don't have any way to get people in, and we don't have any way to get anybody out. And we know we're one spark away. Commissioner Topham up here in Sevier County told us the same thing a couple months ago. We got 800 trees to an acre instead of 40. Healthy forest is 40, we got 800. And our own federal partner will not allow us to go in and create the safe condition that we know has to happen to protect our forests, and we're one spark away from losing our watershed in the second most arid state in the nation. These are the things that are happening. That's not where I wanted to start. We kind of came in with Congressman Chaffetz. Just know, I mean, he was on his way to their planning meeting. He says, what can we do to help? Right? Congressman Bishop is working on task force and congressional hearings right now. Senator Lee is working on legislation. We've got Representative Amadei and Commissioner Dahl, state of Nevada, working on legislation. We've got all kinds of folks in Congress saying, how can we help you now? Because of what is happening right out of here and right out of communities like this. I'm reminded that 239 years ago this year, 56 people met in a room and they said, there's some principles that are worth giving everything for. 56 people. There's some principles worth putting it all on the line for. And they did, and it changed the world. What's exciting to see is that's happening now all over the West, because as Frank was saying, you know, you get to the point where you've got nowhere else to go. You get to the point on some of these things, Benoit County and, you know, Sevier County, you get to a point where you really don't have anywhere else to go. And so it's time to start looking back at those fundamental principles. Let's start with a few things. This map really tells the whole story. You've got a card. I think Alan's got some handouts here that will give you an overview, and you'll have a card. And we've got more of those cards. If you need them, we can get those to you. But that tells the whole story. You take that card and you simply ask, why the difference? And then you wait for answers, and the answers are really pretty amusing. Like, well, your land is arid, so therefore the federal government keeps it. And then, I'm serious. This is one of the answers. In fact, political science professor just down the road here in Las Vegas, law professor from University of Utah, the one that wrote the big article that said, oh, this is clearly illegal, you can't do this. One of their arguments is your land is arid, so therefore the federal government keeps it. What about Alaska? You know, they've only got 1 million lakes and 700,000 people, and the federal government controls 62% of their land, 262 million acres, because it's arid. But if we're not asking the questions, these are the kinds of things that we hear. So Alan's got some information there. Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. What a quiet giant. I hope you know how diligent and the work that your commissioner, in particular, has been doing all around the nation. He has carried so much of this in terms of getting national exposure. National Association of Counties has put it on their platform. Not only have they done a resolution, it's on their national platform because of the work of Commissioner Gardner and Commissioner Heaton and Commissioner Miller and some of these others. 1 or 2 people leveraging their voice into millions. That's happening all over the world. I'm grateful for my colleagues to be here and the support that we have. The Utah House and Senate has done more on the restoration of our rights of property and liberty than any other legislative body in the United States of America. You should be very pleased with your state legislature. I'm grateful that they're here. They are front and center on this issue everywhere we go. I mean, I was just in Texas. We were in D.C. A few weeks ago. Everywhere we go, they say, you folks in Utah get it. And what we tell them, and Lowry could attest to this, and Don, what we tell them is it's not because we have some different class of people in the legislature. It's because of the people we represent. We can do this because we still understand these fundamental principles in Utah. And you send us up to do this work for you. And so thank you very much. I'm grateful that you're here. I'm honored that you're here. This is an incredible time. Let's get into some of this stuff. Look at that, right? So you've got the map. You know the map in the upper left-hand corner. That's the federally controlled land. Top right, that is wilderness and roadless rules. Bottom left, that's wildfires more than 250 acres. And the bottom right is 150 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars in mineral value locked up. Tells the whole story right there, doesn't it? Access restricted, health diminished, productivity depressed under increasing federal control of our land, because it violates our principles. It violates our principles. It was never supposed to be that way. So just to be clear, and I know you all know this, but just to be clear, we're talking about this, not that. National parks are off the table. We're not talking about those. Congressionally designated wilderness that has actually been designated by Congress, off the table. We're not talking about that by our choice. We understand beautiful land. We understand our heritage sites in Utah. In fact, we understand them a little bit better than our federal partner, because as you all know, a little over a year ago, our federal partner declared those non-essential and closed them and shut down businesses and communities in our $8 billion a year revenue base for their political squabble. We understand these things. So we're talking about this, not that. Let's be clear on that. So let's just start out on some of these things. I got a quiz for you right at the outset, okay? You ready? Did you know you were going to have an exam today? So here's your quiz, okay? Which Western state successfully made these arguments to get their land back? Right? This is a Western state that their land was controlled by the federal government. They made these arguments and got their land back. So you think about this, and we'll play Jeopardy at the end, okay? Hang on now, you wait. Not wrong, by the way, but we're good. This is their argument, right? I'm quoting from their argument, okay? The federal control over vast amounts of public land within the state restricts the state's ability to provide for and manage the growth and progress of the state. It harms the state's ability to improve, protect, and manage its resources, and is detrimental to the state's ability to generate revenue. I'd ask for an amen if we were in church. The part of the argument says, the Statehood Enabling Act terms created an obligatory compact that any act by the federal government to delay the transfer of the public lands would undoubtedly be an infraction of the compact. Such an oppressive system of federal control over lands within the states has implications of the deepest magnitude and demands the most serious attention of Congress. By the way, we have their attention now. They also ask these questions. The issue of federal control over lands within the states involves questions of the highest importance of the state and the most intense interest of its citizens, such as, is it fair that the state is deprived of the essential powers and authorities possessed by other states to the east? Questions of the highest importance. Should the state be deprived of the ability to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its people? Why shouldn't the state have the same authority to improve and regulate the growth and progress of the lands within its boundaries according to its own views of prosperity and happiness possessed and exercised by states to the east? Is it fair that the eastern states should have to subsidize the state because the federal retention of the lands deprives the state of the ability to generate revenue from vast areas of the land within the states? Why should the federal government exercise within the state purely municipal powers, like land use and planning regulations, that don't exist in states to the east, which only the state and its subdivisions have the right to pass, and which the federal government is not constitutionally authorized to exercise without the consent of the state legislature? That's in that funny thing called the Constitution. Is a claim to such extraordinary powers by the federal government consistent with the rights reserved to the states by the Constitution? Or are they expressly granted anywhere in the States Enabling Act? Remember, this is a Western state that made these arguments successfully and got their land transferred from the federal government. Any guesses? Hawaii. Good guess, wrong. Hawaii did get all their land. In 1959, they made arguments probably similar to this, but this wasn't their arguments. At statehood, they didn't have to get their lands transferred because at statehood, they mobilized politically, and right in their Enabling Act it says, we hereby transfer directly to the state of Hawaii title to all the public lands, title which is held in the United States immediately prior to its admission. And in 1959, Hawaii got all of its land. Hawaii's a Western state, aren't they? Federal government transferred all their land at statehood. I thought it was just a Western land problem. No, they got all the land. Any other guesses? Not Hawaii. That's a good guess, though. Florida. Florida, really good guess. Florida is close. Florida was right in the same pack with these. Oh, I have one more question. Oh, does the federal government have any valid and binding right to discriminate against new states in the West by retaining forever these lands? Do they have the right to, do we believe in discrimination in the United States of America? I didn't think we did. Do we believe in equality? Do we believe in treating people unequally? Well, we'll show you something on that. So, that's their original resolution. You can read it on the American Lands Council website. Just go to documents and history, and you can read that whole thing right on the website. They were 96.25% federally controlled for decades. What are we crying about? We're only 67% federally controlled. Nevada's only 85%. They were 96.25% federally controlled for decades. So was Missouri, and Louisiana, and Florida, and Indiana, and Arkansas, and Mississippi, and Alabama. They were as much as 90% federally controlled for decades. And they made these arguments successfully. Because, just like those 56 people that met in a room, they said, there are principles worth going all in on, and property is one of them. Because liberty cannot exist, and life has no real meaning without the right and control of property. Does that make sense? Liberty does not exist, which is the meaning of our life, without the right and control of property. So, anybody know what that picture is? I saw this the other day. I had to put it in here for you. You know what that is? The land rush in Oklahoma. You know that Oklahoma has been doing a reenactment of this ever since, and the BLM has now shut it down. They said you can't do a reenactment. But what are they racing for? Land. Why would you run for land? We have commercials all over the place now saying land's a liability. You seen the TV commercials? Can you believe that? Property's a liability? No, it never has been in the history of the United States ever. And yet you've got folks out, think of this. The fact that we've got folks out spending millions of dollars tells you how strong our case is. They're spending millions of dollars to try to tell people land is a liability. Well, not to these folks, and not to these folks. I'm sure some of you, as I have, I've sat in Wyoming, sitting by a little trail, seeing where my ancestors walked, some of them barefoot, a lot of them barefoot, some of them carrying a cart with everything they own to come out to a desert. Why would they do such a thing? Because they wanted to be able to govern themselves, they wanted to be left alone, and they wanted to have a piece of dirt that they could pass on to their kids and pass that opportunity on, because that's what they knew was the fundamental basis of prosperity in the United States of America. And so we inherited that. We inherited that all along the way, where people put it all on the line, because they knew that liberty cannot exist without the right and control of property. In fact, here's how Ronald Reagan put it, right? He says, I love this thing, he says, there are no easy answers, but there are simple ones. It just takes courage. Just honor the same promise to Utah that you kept with North Dakota and with Illinois. I'll show you that the promises are the same. Just honor the same promise. There are no easy answers, but there sure are simple ones. This always fascinates me. When you think of what the job of government? It tells us right in our birth certificate. It says that to secure these rights, liberty, life, the right and control of property, self-governance, governments exist among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's why government exists. Illinois knew that, Missouri knew that, Florida knew that, and they were willing to fight for it. If you want a fun homework assignment, go pull up that Illinois resolution off the American Lands Council website. Read it in its original text. At one point in that resolution, they said, you're going to transfer these lands or there's going to be trouble. But they did it in really nice 1830s language. It's really cool when you read it and kind of break it down. But they just said, no is not an option. No is not an option. Because they understood that government exists to secure these rights. And so when you've got people like Benewah County, Idaho, and like Sevier County, Utah, and Washington County, Utah, and Kane County, Utah, where our people used to have a rich resource industry that we managed responsibly, along with a tourism and a recreation industry, and we could educate our children, and we could employ our people, and we could provide government services, and we weren't dependent on the federal government for 35% of our revenue, number one line item of revenue in the state budget, federal funds that are going away. They knew that that was the case. Governments exist to secure those rights. And Justice Sutherland, our one and only U.S. Supreme Court judge from Utah, George Sutherland, he tells us that same thing. He says, man has three great rights. They're so connected as to be a single right. Life, liberty, property. Because if you give a man his life, but you take away his liberty, you take away all that makes life worth living. Right? If you give him his liberty, but you take away his property, which is the fruit and the badge of his liberty, you still leave him a slave. That's why governments exist. That's why you hire the people you hire at the local, state, and national level. And if they're not doing what you want them to do, well, guess what? If you don't act like the boss, they won't treat you like the boss. And so we've got to hire and inspire people that understand those principles if we want them to be honored. And guess what? Our guys are coming. They're moving. It's happening. This is a big effort. It takes time. But guys, there is so much happening in such a short period of time. That's why your SUA folks are afraid and they're willing to spend millions of dollars to lie to people. It costs a lot of money to tell lies. It doesn't cost a lot of money to tell the truth. But we got to get that message out. So this is why I'm here. This is my personal mission statement. To secure the blessings of life, liberty, the right and control of property, and self-governance to my family. I love my kids dearly, and I'm so concerned about what's going forward for them. That's why I got into the state legislature. I didn't want to do this. I had a nice law practice. I was, Chamber of Commerce and Rotary Club and all the rest. But at some point, just like those 56, and just like Illinois, at some point it's time to decide how much we're in for the principles that absolutely underpin who we are. Rights we don't know are no better than rights we don't have. And rights we don't exercise are no better than rights we don't have. It's critical in what we're talking about. So 3 fundamentals. The statehood terms, Utah, North Dakota, they're word for word the same on the obligation to transfer public lands. I'll show them to you in just a second. Utah, South Dakota, word for word the same. In fact, North Dakota and Montana and Washington State, they have the same document, not just the same language. Ours is the exact same language. They have the same document on the duty of the federal government at statehood to transfer the public lands. North and South Dakota, they transfer the lands. Montana and Washington, not so much. 29 million acres in Washington, about 30 some odd million acres in Montana rather, 30 some odd million acres in Washington, and the rest of the story. The statehood terms are the same. So when University of Utah comes out and says, oh, this is a non-starter, it legally can never happen, guess what facts they conveniently ignore? Don't even talk about it, won't even show it. In fact, I was debating the law professor that wrote that article with Speaker Lockhart right down here. Some of you were there just a few months ago. And we showed him right there. In fact, I gave him my slides and said these Enabling Act terms are the same. And he conveniently ignored that fact in his legal analysis. He conveniently ignored a full 1/3 of the property clause. But see, you got to do that sort of thing when it takes a whole lot more work to obscure the truth than it does to tell the truth. So the promises are the same. It's already been done. We just talked about that. We'll look at that a little bit more. It's the only solution big enough. It's the only solution big enough for national security when 95% of the rare earth minerals that we have to have for electronic technology, for renewable energy technology, most critically for our national defense technology. You know where 95% of our rare earth minerals come from? Come from China right now. 95% of the rare earth minerals that we have to keep our defense operating, electronic technology and renewable energy going, come from China. Guess what's locked up all over the western lands? Rare earth minerals. We've got more recoverable oil than the rest of the world combined locked up in just Utah, Colorado, Wyoming on federally controlled lands. Can't get to it. You saw the forest issue, health, we're burning more than 6 million acres a year on federally controlled lands. So here you go, side by side, no sleight of hand, nothing up my sleeve. This is Utah's Enabling Act, along with the Enabling Act that is the combined document of North and South Dakota, Montana, and Washington. Shall not be repugnant to the Constitution, to the Declaration of Independence. Ordinance is irrevocable without consent of the state and Congress. People inhabiting the state propose and do agree and declare that they forever disclaim all right and title to the unappropriated public lands until title thereto shall have been extinguished. It's the exact same language. What people will say, and what this law professor from University of Utah, they'll say, forever disclaim all right and title. I'm going to put myself as if I understand what was happening in 1894, and I'm going to say forever disclaim all right and title means those people that came barefoot with a handcart to get liberty, property, and self-governance, their very first act of statehood was to give it up. That's what they want you to believe. I'm not buying it. I'll never buy it, because it's not true. Because that same language is in the enabling acts of all the other states. That was a quitclaim deed. Any of you that do anything in real estate? You got an escrow agent. A lot of times the escrow agent's going to hold title to things, and the escrow agent's going to clear up title and then disperse things out. It's exactly what was going on. In fact, the Supreme Court has called it a guardianship. They called it that the federal government's only a trustee of those lands, that they only hold the lands for temporary purposes for the states ultimately to be created. And so the states, because Mexico had claim to land, and Spain had claim to land, and Britain had claim to land, and all kinds of people had claim to land when they were creating states, they said, you give us a quitclaim deed, we're going to clean up the title, and so when we transfer the land so that it'll be productive and be taxable, and you'll have control over it, it'll be clean title, because then we can transfer it faster and for more money, because, oh, by the way, in the Enabling Act, let me go to this one, right here, 5% of the proceeds of the sale of public lands which shall be sold shall be paid to the state to support the common schools. That's part of that obligation. So tell me we bargained to get 5% of the land, any of the lands that were sold, 95% would go to pay the national debt, and we made that bargain after coming here barefoot with handcarts so that they'd keep it forever. And we made that bargain with a constitution that says in Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, Congress shall have the power to dispose of and make needful rules and regulations respecting the territory, but nothing shall prejudice any claims of the United States or the particular states. The claims were that escrow, that trust that both parties had. But the argument is, oh, you Western states just gave it up. That's the argument that's out there. You see how strong this case is? Now, it's not easy. It's simple. It's not easy, like Ronald Reagan said. It is simple. It's going to take the same kind of persistence and going all in that Illinois and Missouri and Florida did, and those original 56 did. But guys, it's already happening. Because your legislature and what's happening here, I wish I could show you vividly what's happening all around the nation. Legislator from New Hampshire called me the other day, said, I just filed the resolution to support the transfer of public lands. South Carolina has already passed a resolution supporting the transfer of public lands. National Association of Counties, American Farm Bureau, Republican National Committee, legislator in Texas is filing a resolution. This is happening all over the nation. We've already gone through that. The promises are exactly the same, right? So 2009, the United States Supreme Court said Congress does not have the authority to just change our Enabling Act on its own. The consequences of admission are instantaneous. This is unanimous U.S. Supreme Court about 5 years ago. The consequences of admission are instantaneous, and it would ignore the uniquely sovereign character of that event. That's pretty good language, right? The uniquely sovereign character of that event, to even suggest that subsequent acts of Congress could somehow diminish what was already bestowed at statehood. And this applies with even greater force where virtually all of a state's public lands are at stake. Congress doesn't have the authority to just change that deal with Utah and with other western states. They got to keep the same deal. Now, the Supreme Court has also said, this is just, well, it was a year and a half ago, 2013, United States Supreme Court said, the constitutional equality of the states is essential to the harmonious operation of the republic. Think about what that means. The constitutional equality of the states is essential to our very operation of government. Think about that for a second. Commissioners, Commissioner Miller, what happened last January when, first of all, PILT. PILT is?
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Payment in lieu of the taxes that we would have gotten if
we could not tax the lands that are within the boundaries of the county.
Yeah, if they had kept their promise, we would have gotten the taxes, right? If they had kept the same promise with North Dakota. So it's payment in lieu of the taxes we would otherwise get if they had kept their promise. Payment in lieu of taxes. So how much does that equate, do you think, to what the taxable value you would get if you just controlled all the land in Iron County?
Well, we've done some analysis of that. It kind of ranges anywhere about, we're getting about $1 for every 50 that we could be. And that's a big number. So we're getting 3.1 million currently.
In PILT?
Yeah, you multiply that out, we're talking, over 100 million, 150 million.
So it's somewhere between 2 and 12 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
Of what you would get if you controlled your own land, right? So that's the good deal. And now in 1976, when they made that deal, because it was 1976 when Congress said we're just going to keep the land. We know we've had this promise for 200 years, we're just going to keep the land. But we're going to give you this payment in lieu of taxes. It's going to be permanent, it's going to be mandatory, it's going to be just as good as sovereignty. So last January, what happened? Did it end up in the budget?
It didn't end up in the budget.
Because they haven't had a budget for 5 years, right?
They did have a budget.
So then they had an omnibus spending bill. Did it end up in the omnibus spending bill?
No.
No, it didn't end up in the omnibus spending bill. Where did they put PILT?
Farm bill.
In the Farm Bill. And in the Farm Bill, what else did they put in the Farm Bill for the Western legislators to vote for PILT?
All of the welfare.
Food stamps. So how much was PILT?
About 400 million.
400 million. How much was food stamps? 40 billion a year for 5 years. You got PILT for 1 year for 400 million, and every Western legislator had to plug their nose and vote for it because it's critical to our counties, the funding of our counties, because we become dependent because we don't have control of our own land. So for 400 million in PILT, we had to bargain away 5 years of food stamps at 40 billion a year. Does that sound like constitutional equality of the states? In the political operation, not economic. This is the political operation of our state. We have to go back and beg as a colony every year for special dispensations to just educate our kids and provide public safety and transportation. Instead of, if we just controlled our own land like everybody east of Colorado, if they just kept the same promise. So that's what the Supreme Court was talking about. They also said that there's a fundamental principle of equal sovereignty among the states. Our nation was and is a union. Critical word. Our nation was and is a union of states equal in power, dignity, and authority. Commissioner Heaton, are you equal to the counties in Iowa, in Kane County?
We own about 6% of Kane County.
How much taxable land have you got?
6%.
6%. What are you in Washington County?
About 18.
About 18% Iron County?
About 30-40%.
30-40%. So you're pretty much equal with the counties in Iowa that can have 100% taxable land. They control everything they're doing, right?
Not so much.
Not so much. Not so much. This is what the Supreme Court's talking about. Do you see why SUA is so anxious to run millions of dollars of ads so people don't know this stuff? Right? They understand the strength of the argument. We have to decide if we're in or not. So, why the difference? That's the key question. You've got to know we are leading the charge all over the nation. Everywhere I go, they say, you guys in Utah, this is the single best example of how to restore balance in the United States of America. Because you can see it right in front of you. And you can see when you've succeeded right in front of you. Do you know that right now, Canada is transferring land, water, and resources. They've already transferred it to the provinces over the last decade. Just last year, they transferred land, water, and resources to the Northwest Territories. Just last year. And here's what they found out. You're going to love this. They discovered in doing this that when people closest to the resources make the decisions, they get a better decision.
enterprise there.
And in the United States of America, founded on the notions of liberty, property, self-governance, we're going the other way because we tolerate it. Because we tolerate it. Not because it's right, but because we tolerate it. So, back to Illinois. These states, and in fact, Iowa was part of the deal and Michigan was part of this deal we just found out. They were as much as 90% federally controlled for decades. You know what happened? It was one man. One man stood up. His name's Thomas Hart Benton. Any of you have ever read the book Profiles in Courage by JFK? He's one of the half a dozen people featured in that book. One man, he says, my election to the Senate found me doing battle for changing this system of disposing of the public lands. He says, I went all in. I resolved to move against the whole system. I did it in speeches so that we get the people mobilized so they'd hire and inspire leaders, and also in bills that I ran in Congress for a long time. He says the federal government was like a stepmother instead of a natural mother. They became a monopolizer of the vacant lands of the West. Vacant lands of the West. Who's he talking about? Illinois and Florida. In fact, Florida sent a resolution. Florida said we're the worst off of all the western states because you're controlling all our land. Right? Became a monopolizer of the lands of the West. Like all monopolies, it was a hardship. Few or none of our public men were even talking about this before I came into the councils. I raised my voice. It's certain a great change has taken place, sentiment of Congress, but more so the people. The people went all in and wouldn't tolerate because it's the very fundamental nature of our nation. Members of Congress should fix their eyes steadily upon the period of the speedy extinction of the federal title to all the lands within their respective boundaries. Well, how do you get members of Congress to fix their eyes steadily on something? You melt down the phone lines. Every time you see them. Every time you have access to them. Email, Facebook, Twitter, come on. Benjamin Franklin would slap us silly if we sat here and said, oh, I can't do anything. He would sit and type one letter at a time and change the world. Right? So we've got to get our members of Congress and help them get their colleagues in Congress to fix their eyes steadily upon the period of the speedy extinction of the federal title to all the lands within the boundaries of the western states. Because it's already been done. They did this very thing. I love it when they say, when they try to tell us what our Enabling Act means. I got a better idea. Why don't we go back to the Utah legislature right about the time that our Enabling Act was done and see what they thought it means. So this is a resolution from the Utah legislature in 1915. That's less than 20 years from our statehood, right? Here's what they say. They say, this is a memorial asking for a more liberal national policy in the disposition of the public domain. They say, we view with alarm and apprehension the national tendency toward the curtailment of the former liberal policies in handling the public domain and disposing of the natural resources. They say, in harmony with the spirit and the letter of the land grants to the national government. That's where the states put it in trust. They put it in escrow, right? In harmony with the spirit and the letter of the land grants to the national government, and in conformity with the terms of our Enabling Act, we hereby memorialize the President and Congress for the speedy return to the former liberal national attitude toward the public domain. We earnestly urge a policy that will afford an opportunity to settle our lands, make use of our resources on terms of equality with the older states for the benefit of building of the state and the strength of the nation. You see, they understood the principles, right? And yet people today will try to say, oh no, this is what your Enabling Act means. No, the folks that did it pretty much knew what it meant. And it meant the same thing that it meant to all the states east of Colorado, which is you only hold it in trust. You were never meant to be a land baron. You got to dispose of the land so that we've got property, liberty, self-governance, because that's what we're based on. By 1932, the states had mobilized and they had fixed their members of Congress. They'd fixed their eyes steadily on the extinction of the land. If you can see right there, congressional hearings granting remaining unreserved public lands to the states. Congress was right there to grant the land because they had focused their resolve. And the agencies stepped in and they said, okay, we know we got to transfer you the land. We know it's a trust duty. We know it's our obligation. We'll transfer all the surplus land to y'all. We're just going to have the federal government keep all the minerals. And our governor in Utah, Democrat Governor George Dern, said, like heck you will. In fact, he said, if you keep everything that's worth anything at all, you'll leave us with nothing but the skin of a squeezed lemon. And they rejected the deal, and he got all the other states to say, no, you got to keep the whole promise. You got to keep the whole promise. So that's 1932. And guess what happened right after 1932? Then they passed as a stopgap the Taylor Grazing Act. Look at this is the very first line of the Taylor Grazing Act. In order to promote the highest use of the public lands, pending its final disposal. They still understood what that meant up until 1976. Well, then you're in the middle of the Great Depression, and the states are scrambling to figure out how to take care of their people. Then you've got World War II, and the states are scrambling, everybody's scrambling. And so by the time that ends, you've got a whole new cast of people in the state legislatures, and this institutional history fades into the woodwork until the environmental movement, so-called environmental movement that's now burning 7 million acres of our forest, starts getting into swing saying, oh, you know what? It's always been this way. The federal government's always had this land, and because they've always had this land, that's the way it always should be. It's not at all the way it's always been. That's not at all the way it should be. That's not at all what our principles say. But that's what we've fallen into, because rights we don't know are no better than rights we don't have, and rights we don't exercise are no better than rights we don't have. Because liberty can't exist. Life has no meaning without the right and control of property. Not just a Western issue. We looked at that. That's access. You know that story all too well. You know that. 150 trillion in minerals locked up. More recoverable oil than the rest of the world combined locked up in just Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. And China is already compelling South American countries to auction off hundreds of thousands of acres and all their resources to satisfy debt. It's a darn good thing we don't owe any money to China right now, right? They're already doing this. Think about what Benjamin Franklin said. Think what you do when you run in debt. You give another power over your liberty. And yet we've got all of the opportunity. We had a cab driver in D.C. a couple weeks ago. We were with Speaker Lockhart and Representative Stratton and Representative Brown. And this cab driver, actually we had Senate President Niederhauser as well. This cab driver was from Ethiopia. And we said, well, what do the stories they tell about what they've come from, it's incredible. And they come here and they say, what do you think about America? What do you think? I mean, we've got all these problems. He says, problems? You guys don't know what problems are. You have all the tools. You have all the tools. You have a system where you don't get shot for trying to fix steadily the eyes of your member of Congress to get something done. He says, you have all the tools. It's so incredible to talk to these guys. Really amazing. Nevada, Commissioner Dahl chairs their task force on the management of public lands. They came out and states already manage millions of acres of public land. Isn't that crazy that they do these ads and they say, oh, be afraid. We can't manage our own land. We already manage 3.5 million acres. We've already got departments that are doing this very thing. Arizona manages 9 million acres, and by the way, the state makes money managing the land that it manages. The federal government loses money managing the same lands, right? But they come out with these things. In fact, Utah makes $33 an acre positive net revenue. Federal government loses $1 an acre. Nevada came out and said if we took just the BLM land and had it transferred, it'd be anywhere from about $300 million to $1 billion a year positive net revenue. In Utah, we did a study, $500,000, team of economists from our 3 major universities, 18 months, they just came back in December, guess what they found? If we changed nothing about how we manage the land. Now clearly we would not manage our forests for maximum combustion the way it's happening right now under federal policies. But if we changed nothing, $281 million in expense, $331 million in revenue. If we changed nothing. Now obviously we would look at more productivity, more access, better health, but that report came back. There's just some other stuff that goes, I'll show you this one, I love this one. This came out of Congress year before last. They said the state of Washington, people talk about wildfires and all, right? No, the fires, we could never manage the fire risk. That's just way too expensive. Only the federal government can do that. State of Washington only generates 1,283 times more revenue per acre than the U.S. Forest Service. State of Idaho only generates 917 times more revenue per acre than the U.S. Forest Service does, because they actually treat it like a garden. They actually harvest, and it's renewable, and it's sustainable, and they don't burn up millions of animals and destroy the watershed like we saw here in Huntington Canyon, like you're seeing in Cedar Breaks right now, right? Policy statement that was passed, we had a meeting in October of leaders from all over the United States. Lieutenant Governor from Alaska was there, our Lieutenant Governor, we had 14 different states there. There's a policy statement that talks about the principles and the policy behind this. Federal public land becomes state public land. Multiple use, sustained yield with local planning, right? By valid existing rights, we carry those over status quo. We're working on all that stuff right now. It's a big job, it's gonna take time, but we're working on all that right now. You can read the policy statement on the website. On the website, you can go on, there's an interactive map. What's happening in my state? You can click right on any of those things and you can see what's going on. We've got legislators all over that are now inputting what's happening in their states in their sessions right now. And you can go see what's happening on there. Also on the website for eastern states, we're getting them to start doing resolutions as well. There's a spot for them there. We'll cover this tonight. This is a great quote, but basically it says that our oath of office for local, state, and national representatives, it's not just the parchment checks, it's not just the Constitution. Our oath of office obliges the officers of the several states to vigorously oppose usurpations by the federal government. That's what government exists to do. We're supposed to be a healthy check. Supreme Court has said that over and over and over again. They said 13 legislatures completely organized, possessed of confidence of the people, and having the means as well as the inclination successfully to oppose usurpations, encroachments by the federal government. They said, under these circumstances, none but madmen would attempt such a usurpation. But you see, the states haven't been acting like states. It's our job to restore balance and make sure that our federal partner focuses on doing well those things that only it can do, you know, like world peace and a sound monetary system, and leave tending the garden to those who deal with the local land use issues that know their unique garden spot. It's our job to make sure they focus on doing those things that only they're supposed to do. And then John Dickinson, I love this, he says it'll be their own faults if the several states allow the federal government to interfere in the things of their jurisdiction. So we've got decisions to make. What do we do now? Here's the path forward. Governor laid this out. Lieutenant Governor Bell laid it out. Governor Herbert, we had a meeting in August with all the stakeholders, our congressional delegation, Attorney General, members of Congress, legislators, county commissioners, sheriffs. Path forward, number one, education. Any of y'all have a friend? Anybody have a friend? Anybody? Man, you guys are a tough crowd. Nobody's got a friend. Rebecca does. Tell someone. That's education. In your counties, Commissioner Gardner, your county's passed a resolution, your school district passed a resolution, your farm bureau, your county parties have all passed resolutions. That's leveraging your voice. The cities, that's right, all the cities, yeah, Enoch and all these other cities have passed resolutions. Keep doing them over and over and again. Make sure, remember, we're fixing the eyes steadily of our members of Congress on the period of the speedy extinction of the title of our land, right? That's happening all over the West, right? Education. We've got so many tools to educate. We've got to keep doing that. Negotiation. I'll tell you, Commissioner Miller right here, what an incredible, when you get the BLM and you put him in front of your county, because he has jurisdiction, and he invites the federal officers to tell me, hey, why do you have 3 times, 4 times, 10 times the amount of horses that your own law says you're supposed to have, and it's destroying our ecosystem, and your solution is to cut grazing another 50%. Can you explain that to me? Because I got to take care of health, safety, welfare in my county. And you know what? If you just keep our same statehood agreement that you kept with all states east of Colorado, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. How come you're not doing that? There's a Thomas Hart Benton right there. But we got to be doing more of that. That's what negotiation looks like at the local, state, and national level. Legislation, local, state, and national level. These resolutions we've got in Garfield County and some of these others, we've passed legislation saying, wait a minute, it's our job to protect health, safety, welfare, not yours. Supreme Court said that over and over and over again. We're not going to let our forest just burn and then figure out what to do after the horse is out of the barn. We're going to start moving. That's starting to happen at the state level legislation, and now we've got members of Congress because of you. We've got the attention of members of Congress, and now they're tripping all over themselves to decide who can run the bill. Because of you. Litigation. We appropriated, again, because of you and the power that you give us in the legislature, we appropriated $2 million this last year to begin building the litigation case. It's going to take a lot more than that, but to begin building the litigation case. In fact, we met with some really, really top attorneys in D.C. said, $20 million, you can change the world. Would it be worth it? Would it be worth it? to access more recoverable oil than the rest of the world combined and not burn our forests to the ground and kill animals and destroy watershed? Would it be worth it? Well, that's going to come from you. That power to your legislators, to your governor, to your attorney general, to your members of Congress is going to come from you. You're going to fix their eyes steadily upon that period of speedy extinction. But we're leading out. We're leading the way. Other states are starting to come on board. In Nevada, a former law partner of mine is now a great lawyer, is now the lieutenant governor. Their attorney general, solid guy. The attorney general in Arizona, met with him before he got elected. Solid on board. The governor of Arizona met with him before he got elected. It was an issue in their campaign. That's how we fix their eyes steadily. We got their attention in campaign season, right? It's happening all over. In Montana, oh my gosh, the things that are happening in Montana. Alaska, Commissioner Heaton just got back from Alaska. He was like a rock star up there because we go up there and they say, you guys give us hope because it's founded on real principles of liberty, property, self-governance. Litigation, we're moving forward. That's a big issue. We're working on it. Just so you know, you had the newspapers getting all in a dither. Oh, are you going to file on January 1st because there was the deadline in my legislation? No, we gave you until December 31st to work with us as a partner. You've chosen not to do that. We're going to move forward with these 4 things on our timetable, and we're preparing the litigation, and we're going to prepare the expert witnesses, and we're going to prepare the evidence, and we're going to file when we're ready. And we'll let you know when that is. And just so you know, we've got a commission on the stewardship of public lands, and our counties are carrying such tremendous weight in this. We're getting this thing ready, and we're going to win. Because it's true, and it's right, and it's based on our principles. All right, so what can we do? Well, number one, if you believe in the right and control of property, liberty, and self-governance, that they're fundamental to our American experience, that's critical. Do you believe that these things are worth sacrificing for, just like the people that sacrificed for us? And do you believe that if Illinois can do it, the only reason that we're not doing it is because we lack some knowledge, some commitment, and some effort? Well, if you believe those things, well, here's what you do. You tell someone. How do you do that? Man, there's a million different ways. Tell someone. Let them know. Share with them. Let them know. And if you've got the ability to put a whole ton of money in it to tell 1,000,000 people, great, whatever you can do. I'm telling you, this is the vehicle leading the nation. People all over the nation are recognizing that. And if we can help you tell someone, please contact us, let us know. There are opportunities to get that out. If you are committed to the principles of liberty, property, self-governance, and if Illinois can do it, we can do it, and why not us? Please let us know. Talk to these board members and these people. And let them know that you want to go all in and whatever you can do to the cause, and let us know. Leverage your voice or join the team. On the website, I'll show you in just a second, you can go log in and we'll get you on the emails and let us know what your skills are and your abilities. Get on board. This is moving, get on board. Leverage your voice. That's what Commissioner Gardner did and Commissioner Heaton did when they got the National Association of Counties to not only pass a resolution but put it on their platform. They turned their couple of voices into millions. Representative Marty Halverson in Wyoming, she turned her one voice into millions when she got the Republican National Committee to pass a resolution supporting this. American Farm Bureau, Allen and others, American Farm Bureau, it's part of their national platform. They've leveraged their one voice into millions. Tell your leaders, remember, fix their eyes steadily. And don't just tell them once, and don't assume they already know, even our own guys in Utah. Most of them do, most of them are committed, but don't assume that. Tell them. And then after you tell them again. And after you tell them again. And when you told them by email, tell them by telephone. And when you tell them by telephone, then write a letter. And then tell them when you see them. It's happening because you're doing that. Because you're doing that very simple thing, it's happening. If you can contribute financially, if this is something where you are one of those people that you think it's time to go in because I know what's happening to property, I can see the trajectory, get on board. We're happy to help, to be the vehicle for what you want to do to secure liberty, property, and self-governance, because it's time. It's time, and encourage others. So on the website, you can go sign in. You can sign in through Facebook or email and get engaged there. There's a petition on the website you can sign. I'd encourage you to get on there, sign that, get as many other people as you can to sign the petition. It matters. There's a little survey, and then there's all kinds of information on there that you can share. And we're working as hard as we can to get that organized and going as fast as you can, but there's so much information on there. You can actually text. If you text, you can text the word sign right there, and you can sign that petition right now by text. But tons of information on the website. I'm going to just skip through some of this. You guys know all this. This right here, 10,000 miles of transmission lines by the Forest Service own report. 10,000 miles of transmission lines at extreme risk because of the fuel load in the forest. That takes the grid down across the whole West. It's there right now. They know it's coming. Soft-minded man always fears change. He feels security in the status quo, has an almost morbid fear of the new. For him, the greatest pain is the pain of the new idea, but that's not how Washington County was founded. That's not how Utah was founded, and that's not how the West was founded. It was not founded by soft-minded men. Fast. I think we've probably gone through that. Let me come back right here, and we'll just go back to this. Let me just end right here, and then we'll take some questions, whatever time we've got. Ronald Reagan, 1987, made this statement. I love it. I end every speech with it because I think it's so perfect. And I think if he were here today, he would tell us this very same thing. You know, that was red phones and nuclear proliferation. They didn't know if the bombs were going off. They didn't know what was going to happen. And he made this statement. He said, "This is a wonderful time to be alive. We're lucky not to live in pale and timid times. We've been blessed with the opportunity to stand for something. For liberty and freedom and fairness, and I would submit property, and these are things we're fighting for. We're devoting our lives to. So let us go forth with good cheer and stout hearts, happy warriors, out to seize back a country and a world of freedom." Thank you very, very much. Happy to take questions.